Welcome back to episode 2 of The Frozen Take. I hope you enjoyed episode 1. And today in episode 2, we will be going over where I believe the free agents will land. We'll be going over guys such as Brett Burns, Mitch Marner, Andrei Kuzmenko, and we will also be taking a look at the John Tavares deal and the Sam Bennett deal and how those shook out and how I think those will impact the teams and if they're good deals and if they're bad deals. But without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start by breaking down the John Tavares deal. He just came out and signed a 4-year deal to stay with Toronto, making $4.38 million a season. Overall, I think this is a great deal for both sides. John Tavares gets paid, gets to stay and play where he wants to play in his hometown of Toronto. And Toronto gets to keep a really great second line center. They keep him behind Auston Matthews. He provides depth. He provides that veteran leadership experience, which is what this Maple Leafs team desperately needs, especially as they're about to lose a guy like Mitch Marner. It's kind of come out that he's not going to return. So being able to keep a guy like John Tavares for a relatively cheap deal for good term, this is just an overall great deal for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think John Tavares gets to stay very happy and he gets to play where he wants to play. Now, as we step aside and we take a look at the Florida Panthers, the team that knocked out the Toronto Maple Leafs in this year's past playoffs, well, Sam Bennett, he was just one heck of a player this past go in the playoffs. He was playoff MVP and he was phenomenal for them. This is a guy that people kind of slept on during the regular season. He didn't really produce all that much, but man, when it mattered most, this guy really stepped up to the plate and he kept the Florida Panthers in the thick of things and took them ultimately all the way, which is what you really need from a guy. He provides center depth for the Florida Panthers. He got an 8x8 contract, which I think is perfect for both sides. Sam Bennett gets the really big deal he's been looking for his whole career. He's going to make $8 million per season. It's for 8 years, the max term a guy can get in the NHL right now. And ultimately, he probably could have got 9 or 10 on the open market, but he wanted to stay in a place where he felt he had a chance to win. And Florida's just probably his home now. He doesn't want to have to sell his house, move somewhere else, kind of learn new systems with a new team. He's just happy where he is and he's content, and ultimately that's what's going to keep him happy as a player and keep him producing at the highest levels. And one other keynote is that Florida, there is no state tax, so he's going to keep a little bit more money for 41 of his games because they play 41 games at home every season. So even though he took a little bit of a pay cut compared to what he would have got on the open market, overall it's probably going to shake out to be about the same amount of money in the long run. Now let's take a dive into my free agency predictions and where I think guys are going to land. And first off, it's Mitch Marner. He is the big fish of this free agency class, and he won't be staying in Toronto. It's come out, and recently he said he wants to come to the West Coast, and it's really looking like it's probably going to be Vegas or the Los Angeles Kings. The Golden Knights are definitely the front runner by a slight edge. If for some reason he didn't go to Vegas or the Kings, he would then probably go to the Anaheim Ducks. He seems to be somewhat open in interest there, but he wants to go to a winner. So I think that's what gives Vegas and LA the slight edge in that department. Initially, he wanted to get the full 7, but then with rumors swirling that the cap is going to go up to 114 million soon, he's like, maybe I'll take a short-term deal here. He's open to maybe signing in between 1 and 3 years, making $12-13 million for the short-term deal he's looking at, and then he wants to go in and cash in big again when the cap goes up. And then he's thinking, maybe I'll get $18 million and make 18 for 7 or 6 more years after the following deal, which I think is a smart move. And honestly, for LA and Vegas, this is very good for them. They probably like to hear this because they're both teams that are kind of up against the cap. And if they save a few $1 million, maybe that can mean they can bring in one more piece to help them make a push or bolster up the roster a little bit more. Ultimately, I think Mitch Marner is worth 12, 13. 14 million is where I would say, now Is he going to provide $14 million worth of value? If you get Mitch Marner that comes to play during the regular season into the playoffs, I would say $14 million, fair price. If he's done what he's kind of done in the playoffs throughout his career, you're like $14 million, whew, that is a steep price to pay. But, if you want the big fish, you got to fork up the cash, and that's kind of the situation that Vegas and LA are in. And they want to win. They're going for the Stanley Cup. Both these teams, they're pushing hard. But ultimately, I think whoever gets Mitch Marner will definitely be set up and in a good position to win. I think Vegas is better equipped to handle a player like Mitch Marner. He's similar to Jack Eichel in the sense that people were always like, Jack Eichel's not a winner. He can't get it done when it matters. And then he goes to Vegas, boom, he wins the Stanley Cup. And I really think they can kind of do the same thing with Mitch Marner here if they're lucky enough to get him. Taking a look at this from an LA Kings perspective, if he goes to the Kings, he definitely goes up. He plays on the top line with Kempe and Kopitar, and I think this becomes one of the better first lines in all of the NHL. Right now, LA just didn't really have a bona fide first line in the NHL. They had Kuzmenko in there after the deadline. Before that, they had Alex Turcotte. Just not a true number one first line to compete against guys like the McDavids and the Draisaitl's. And so getting a guy like Mitch Marner would go a long ways. Ultimately, $12-13 million is the price I would pay. As we move to the next guy on my list, we're going to take a look at a guy who also played for the Florida Panthers. His name is Aaron Ekblad. This is one of the better defensemen you could grab up in this year's free agency class. He probably really wants to stay with the Florida Panthers. I don't know if the money's going to be there. Like, they're pretty tight up against the cap, especially now that they've signed Sam Bennett. Like, Aaron Ekblad's looking for an 8x8, 8 years, $8 million. I don't know if $8 million's really there. Like, if he wanted to stay in Florida, he's probably going to have to take like 6.5, maybe 7. They could figure out a way to pay him. I don't know. They've also want to keep Marchand, who we'll get to later. But for right now, I think if they don't take, if Aaron Ekblad doesn't stick with Florida, he will be moving on to the Vegas Golden Knights or Philadelphia Flyers. Those are the two teams I have next. Obviously, the Vegas Golden Knights, that's contingent on if they get Mitch Marner. If they get and win the Mitch Marner sweepstakes, then they won't have the money for Aaron Ekblad. But if they don't get Mitch Marner, this is the guy they're definitely looking to add for about $8 million. Obviously, they can only offer him a 7-year deal just because he's not a member of the squad currently. And Philadelphia, they got a lot of money. They could pretty much offer him whatever he needs. And I think he would really help Philadelphia's roster, but he probably is looking to go to more of a win-now team, which is why I would have Vegas slightly ahead of Philadelphia. But if Vegas and Florida can't pay him for whatever reason, I do see him signing in Florida. Personally, if I was to make Aaron Ekblad an offer, I would only give him 7x7. I think $8 million is just slightly too steep for me. I think there's just other guys and other places I'd rather spend that money than on him. As we continue on our list, let's take a look at a guy like Nikolai Ehlers. This is a guy who had a good season with Winnipeg. He's always a very consistent player. You know what you're going to get from him every night and over the course of the season. The only one issue is he battles injuries a lot. So if he's not there for you a whole lot in the lineup, you're like, oh man, I'm paying this guy quite a bit of money because this guy's not going to go cheap in free agency. He's one of the better wingers. Him or Brock Besser is probably the two. Outside of Mitch Marner, of course, are the two guys they're like the 2A, 2B kind of who you would go after Mitch Marner, who would follow after Mitch Marner, sorry. And Nikolai Ehlers looking for a 6-7, so definitely a long-term type deal. And he'll also be looking for $8 million here. $8 million is a little steep again for me. I think 7 is more fair because if he gets injured, then you're paying him and he's not able to produce for you. He's resting up. You got to wait for him to get back into the lineup. If he didn't have injury problems, I would say $8 million is a great price. But because you run the risk of him getting injured, that's why I think 7 is better. He is open to staying in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's trying to re-sign him. They're having some difficulties. So I think a team like Carolina, that could be a spot. They're looking to add another winger. So I think that's a good fit. And my other one, just looking over at my list, I have the Boston Bruins. I think Boston's looking to add another guy. They missed the playoffs, but they would have liked to definitely have been in there and make the playoffs. So I think Nikolai Ehlers helped put them back on track to do that. And that's why I have Boston in the hunt as well. I would say Winnipeg 1, Carolina 2, Boston 3. But overall, if you can get this guy for $7 million, you got yourself a great deal. If you have to pay 8, it's the going rate. I understand. Got to do what you got to do to get a good player. Now, as we move on, we look at a guy like Vladislav Gavrikov. He currently played this past season for the Kings, and he had his best season of all time. Under his standards, this is the best he's ever performed in a season. I know Ken Holland, the GM of the Kings, he definitely wants to re-sign Gavrikov, if that's the option. Gavrikov wants a lot of money. Ken Holland's kind of trying to meet him in the middle. I don't know if it'll work out. If it doesn't work out, I think the New York Rangers is a great place for him to play. I think he fits into their style. He's able to provide some strong defense for them. Pair him up with a guy like Adam Fox. That's a dangerous pairing. If for some reason he doesn't go to New York, I guess my dark horse pick would be the Utah Mammoth. He goes to and plays for Utah. Now this gets interesting because Utah's slowly building a sneaky good roster over there, and people are kind of sleeping on them. But as we move into the price of Gavrikov, I think he's looking for a 7.5, 7-year deal. Like, this is his chance to get paid. He's rightfully earned it. He's waited his whole career, and now he wants the bank. Like, you're going to have to fork up some good dollars to get this guy. He's a solid shutdown D-man for you. He's good to play 20 minutes a night, which is really one if you're having a top-line pairing D-man, which I think he is. With the Kings, he was only playing in a top 4 role, which is maybe kind of unusual, but actually... when Drew Doughty was injured, he became the number 1 guy. He really stepped up, and he would even play sometimes close to 25 minutes a night. So I think he's proven his value. 7.5, I think, is fair value for this guy. If you get him for 7.5 and he does end up playing 20, 25 minutes a night, you got yourself good value, and I think he can definitely help drag your team into the playoffs and push them there. You're going to need some scoring up front, but he'll shut it down on the back end for you, and definitely make your goalie a very happy man knowing that he's in front of him. Another defenseman, Ivan Provorov, and this is probably the guy you go after if you can't get Vladislav Gavrikov. He's kind of like just slightly worse. Gavrikov can play on that top pairing as we talked about. Ivan Provorov is definitely a second pairing guy, good for your third defenseman more so than anything. He'll still eat up 18, 20 minutes a night for you. He puts up points. He shuts it down on the back end. He makes smart plays. Not a liability out there. Definitely good for you in the playoffs. Can help your team make a good playoff push and a good playoff run. He's looking for $7 million, probably 6 or 7 years. I think $7 million is a fair deal. If you could get him for 6.5, that's a good bargain. Right now, I would say teams that are kind of in on him would be the Los Angeles Kings. If they can't re-sign Gavrikov and they can't get Mitch Marner, then they're definitely going to be making a big push for Ivan Provorov so we can fill that hole that they have. 2 other teams, just looking at my list here, I got the Detroit Red Wings. They're on the hunt for another defenseman to kind of round out their D-core. I think he fits in there nicely. They like their Russians. He's a Russian. It seems like almost like a home run pick for them, kind of. And then I also got the Vancouver Canucks. The Vancouver Canucks just kind of need to bolster their roster as a whole. They're not like bad enough to just rebuild and tear it down. Like, they got Quinn Hughes. They got some valuable pieces there. If Pettersson can find his game, like, then Ivan Provorov definitely, maybe they come back into the hunt for the playoffs again. They take like a 7th seed going in, and it kind of revamps the culture a little bit. Provorov's got a lot of NHL experience. He can provide some leadership in that room, and that's why I think he could make a good impact for Vancouver. But overall, LA, Detroit, Vancouver, those would be my picks for Provorov. Since we've just talked about Vancouver so much, let's talk about a guy who's going to be leaving Vancouver, Brock Boeser. Sad to see him go. He's been, I believe, a Vancouver Canuck his whole career, but I think time's up. He wants to go really chase that Stanley Cup and just play in a city that feels maybe more like home to him. I think a good pick for him is Minnesota. They're probably the top of my list. I think he could really push them to go on a little bit of a run second round. I don't know if that he makes them a Stanley Cup contender, but he definitely makes that team a lot better. Boston Bruins is just another one. I think if he ends up on their team, he puts them back in the playoffs. I think if he goes to the Red Wings, he puts them in a playoff spot. He's looking for 7 years, $8 million a season. Honestly, come July 1st, I really feel like more guys should be in on him because he is such a legitimate goal scorer. You know he's going to put up goals. He's going to score 30. Heck, he plays in the right situation. This is a guy getting you 40. And 40 goal scorers are hard to come by in the NHL. 30 goal scorers, you don't find too many of them either. So if you get a chance to really sign a 30, 40 goal scorer, you go after it, and that's why I believe you go after Brock Boeser. Next up, we got Mikael Gramlin. Lately, there's been a lot of rumors that St. Louis is heavy in the hunt for him. He's looking for a 6x6. I think St. Louis is going to offer him $6 million. Personally, I wouldn't pay him $6 million. He had a good season. He deserves $6 million. But I think he's going to go back down to reality next season. $5 million, much more appropriate to pay. If he doesn't end up in St. Louis, I see him ending up in a Winnipeg, Montreal, just another one of those teams. He's kind of more in it for the money, I would say, than he's really trying to win. I think you pay him, maybe he doesn't pan out, you need to get rid of him, you're going to miss the playoffs, you trade him away. If you're in the playoffs, you definitely keep him and you let it ride. Now we get to talk about a very interesting player in free agency. Brad Marchand. He's an old grizzled veteran just coming off winning a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. People kind of were maybe thinking, oh, this is like the twilight of his career. He's going to retire next season or 2 seasons away. But it seems like this guy wants to play into his 40s. Like, he wants to stay in Florida. He wants to chase another Stanley Cup. I know that. Toronto definitely wants a gritty forward like him. He made Toronto pay so many years in the playoffs now. They're like, we need to get this guy so he stops punishing us. Dark horse pick, Utah Mammoth. If Utah could get like a solid veteran like that, it would really help that young group elevate. I think ultimately, he's probably only worth about $6 million a season, and I think the 3 teams I mentioned, if they offer him 6, like, he's definitely considering it, and he'll probably do a 3-4 year deal for those teams. But if he went off the board a little bit, he's gonna be receiving offers probably like $8 million. Maybe they're shorter, like 2-year deals, but don't be surprised if maybe there's a team that like they feel like they're really close to winning. We don't see them. And like, just a random one that's kind of crazy. Maybe the Sharks go out and get him. They sign him for like $8 million. They got lots of cap. Maybe they pay him for like 5 years, $8 million a season. He can really get Will Smith and Macklin Salabrini some good mentorship, teach them what it takes to win in the National Hockey League. I'm not saying this is going to happen for sure, but I think there will be teams out there that aren't really looking to make the playoffs, or they know they won't be good for 2 seasons or so, but they'll be able to give Marchand the money, whereas a cup contender, they're probably only going to be able to pay about 6. So what does he value? Does he want more money near the end of his career, or does he want to chase another Stanley Cup? That's a decision he'll have to make. Since we're kind of talking about guys in the twilight of their career, let's move on to Patrick Kane. This is a great guy. He knows how to win. Former first overall pick in the draft. Like, he has won multiple Stanley Cups. He's been the playoff MVP, won that Conn Smythe. He's won the Art Ross. Like, he puts up points. This guy will do anything to win for your team. Night in, night out. He's old, but he's still producing. I think he had over 60 points this past season with Detroit. I think he stays in Detroit, or I think he goes back to Chicago. I don't really see him going anywhere else. I think if you can get Patrick Kane for $5 million a season, you're laughing. Absolutely laughing. And I think he would sign for $5 million with either Detroit or Chicago. If he signs for 6, I still think great contract, but 5, you are laughing all the way to the bank. I think term doesn't really matter too much with him. I think he always will produce points for you. You'll just have to if he continues to play into his 40s, if you give him like 6-7 year deal, he'll need to play with some younger, faster guys who can still make it happen and elevate his game. He's got that goal scoring touch. He'll just need to be surrounded by guys who are of that mentality too. As of right now, he can still elevate his line mates. He mentors your younger players, which is what you need. You need to develop your young prospects, and Patrick Kane can for sure do that for your team. Now let's move on to the next guy. I got Jonathan Drouin here. Taking a look at him, he probably would have liked to have a better season, so he could have got paid. Right now, he's probably only like a $3 million guy a season is probably what I'll see. Get like in between 1 and 3 years. He probably wants a shorter term deal so he can reprove himself and then maybe elevate his contract status up to a $5-6 million player when the cap goes up. Right now, I got the Los Angeles Kings in the hunt for him, the Winnipeg Jets, and the Montreal Canadiens. I think those are all teams that could really use him. He's a good third-line player with the ability to still play with first-line guys, so he provides a lot of lineup flexibility, which I think is great. If you're paying him $3 million a season, I think he's definitely worth it. You take a stab at this guy. If he works out, you're making out like a bandit. You look like a genius. If he doesn't, it's $3 million. You can probably trade him to a team that, will miss the playoffs, and then you can just reacquire somebody else at the deadline. The next guy I have up is another one of the older guys of the class, and it's Claude Giroux. I personally have him staying in Ottawa. If he doesn't stay in Ottawa, I would personally like to see him reunite back home to Philly, where he started his career and he took him to the Cup Finals. And if not Philly, I would say the third option would probably be Montreal. I just kind of got a gut feeling that if it's not Ottawa or Philly, it's Montreal. He's definitely looking for a short-term deal, but he wants a little bit more money, $5 million. I think for the experience he brings, $5 million is fair. If maybe you get him a little cheaper, you give him 3-4, but you extend the length, I think he is open to that, but ideally he would rather just get more money now and then maybe just get to head off into the sunset a little bit earlier and take a retirement. If he can get like $10 million over the next 2 seasons, 5 a season. Now we're going to go back on a run of defensemen. Up next, we got Dmitry Orlov. This guy's probably looking to rake in about $5.5 million. He's probably going to take one in between a 3 and a 5 year deal. I think this is a little steep for him. Personally, I'd like to get him for 4. He's getting up there in age, especially if you give him a 5 year deal. Like, how good's he really going to be in 5 years? That's kind of how I look at it. I think for the upcoming season and the following one, like the 2 years, you know the player you're getting, and then after that, anything could really happen. I see Washington being in on this guy. I think they want to acquire him, bolster up their D-core a little bit, provide some veteran experience on there. Just looking over at my list here, I got the Detroit Red Wings, another guy, they're on the hunt for some defensemen. So if they can't get some of the higher end guys, this is definitely somebody they look to bring in to play on their second pairing, maybe even their third pairing. He's an expensive third pairing defenseman, but you got to do what you got to do if you want to make the playoffs. And actually, I would say the front runner is the Columbus Blue Jackets because they have a little bit more money. They could pay him a little bit more and really just get what they want. And so that's why I see him being kind of the fit in Columbus. He probably can't win with Columbus. I mean, they were kind of streaky last season. Maybe they squeak in, go for a run, but personally, I wouldn't be going to Columbus if I had any aspirations of winning a Stanley Cup. Playoffs, maybe. Stanley Cup, Now we got another defenseman. We got Brent Burns. I believe he's 40, so he's really at the tail end of his career. He's probably got 1, maybe you could stretch it, say he's got 2 good seasons left in him. You know what you're getting with him. He's played everywhere. He's played at the Olympics. He's gone on long Stanley Cup runs previously with the San Jose Sharks. He's played most recently with the Carolina Hurricanes. He helped them. He definitely brought a lot of veteran experience and leadership in that locker room. So teams are looking to acquire that. I think, if he really wants to win and he signed for no money, I think the Florida Panthers could get him. He would want to go there. I think if he wants to make some actual money, though, he'll go to the Kraken, get paid, or the Senators. If he goes to the Kraken or the Senators, I think he's getting about $5 million for maybe 2 years. Maybe they even give him 3 or 4 because they can. Ultimately, I think the Florida Panthers, though, if he does want to finally get that Stanley Cup, he just needs to play for like league min or just maybe even $1 million just so he can get that Stanley Cup finally. But yeah, those would be my 3 teams and kind of the prices they would have to pay. Now, I've saved kind of the most weird and interesting guy for last. This is the last guy we'll talk about, and it's Andrei Kuzmenko. Andrei Kuzmenko is such a fascinating player because if he doesn't play in the right situations, this guy is just an awful hockey player. No disrespect to the guy, but like we saw in Calgary, how it just really went downhill quickly. In Philadelphia, I mean, it was like, okay, he was just another kind of guy, role player, guy to fill a spot, put up a few points, so couldn't hate him too much in Philly. He was great his rookie season in Vancouver. Like, he blew people away, and people were like, wow, is this guy like kind of like a Kucherov? We didn't know about him. Like, and all of a sudden he just takes off. But then the following season kind of went back to reality, and he became the player people thought he would be. He was no longer that 39 goal scorer from the rookie season. But then the Kings acquired him at the deadline this past season for a 3rd round pick. So basically nothing. And he went on a tear. In the playoffs, he was a point per game, might have been even 1 over. He might have been 7-6. So he openly came out and said, I loved playing with Kopitar and Juice. Juice is Adrian Kempe, that's his nickname out there in Los Angeles. And he said he wants to stay and play in that, but like, who doesn't want to play with a bona fide superstar like Anze Kopitar? This guy's won 2 Stanley Cup. He continues. I believe he just won the Lady Byng again for the 3rd time in his career. Like, just a true great athlete and a good guy out there on the ice. One of the most respectable players in the NHL, I would say. So if he comes back to the Kings, I would say they probably get him for 4.5, but they got to give him like definitely 5 years at that price. If the Kings, for whatever reason, they sign someone else first, he's probably lower on their priorities because they know they could get him, and he wants to stay, so he's lost some of his leverage right there. If he doesn't stay in LA, though, looking over, I got him going to either Minnesota or Columbus. I think those are 2 spots that, you know, they got some players that could really help him. If he goes to Minnesota, he can play with Kirill Kaprizov. That would be a great kind of winger pairing. I think they would put up good points together. Columbus, I think there would just be not very much pressure on him in that environment, and he could just play his game. I mean, Columbus, we've seen guys kind of go through that organization and it hasn't worked out, so maybe he's another PLD story, Pierre-Luc Dubois, or Patrick Laine, where it just gets ugly fast, and ultimately that could happen. You always run that risk. If he goes to somewhere like Columbus or Minnesota, looking at my list here, I have him probably making $5 million because he can command that because he came off so hot at the end of the season. But definitely teams will be weary. They know what has happened before, so they might be reluctant to pay that price. I wouldn't blame them. But overall, you know, he's a good player. He's a little bit weaker on defense, but you know he's an offensive guy. He's kind of all gas, no brakes in that sense, which if you need a goal scorer, he's probably the guy that you need. That's going to wrap it up for episode 2 of The Frozen Take. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.